Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we're back with another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. First, we have "Make sure you vote today if you live in Massey's district," posted by Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the Thomas Massey subreddit. And it's a picture of, I think, them voting for Thomas Massey, and then they added "Don't blame me" under text under there, and they OP added "I did, can't blame me." And yeah, personally, I wish more people voted for Massey, but ultimately, I think it looks like IPAC and its industrial strength propaganda on Fox News and cable news really destroyed him. Just go to show you that social media really isn't real life. So Thomas, if it was only people on social media who were voting, Thomas Massey probably would have taken like 80 to 90% of the vote. But sadly, the traditional media, such as cable news, still plays a big role in when it comes to narratives, and that seems to where all the boomers who got their news come from. It's interesting. Thomas Massey pretty much won unanimously with people under 50, but with people over 50, he struggled, and that goes to show you that people over 50 are still getting their news from Fox News, which is all Israel first, and Trump's the greatest thing ever. You need to go vote on anyone who opposes them. And yeah, just go to show you that you increase it's a good thing that cable news is slowly losing relevance to social media by the year, same with the rest of the legacy media. And I think that's why the libertarian position is with social media is it might not be perfect, but it's definitely better than the legacy media when it comes to going against the official narrative. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, and just like that, the Hannah virus is forgotten, posted by Chili Pepper 00, and they said, "Who would expect? Nothing happened. Haven't heard about the files for a good while now." And yeah, personally, I would agree that, people, it's always just whatever the current thing is. The current thing, people wanted the Hannah virus thing to be the current thing for a while, and eventually people will just move on to what the next current thing is. That's very much how social media and people's attention spans work. Next we have, Trump settles his own lawsuit against the IRS for $1.8 billion of your money from Reason.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't think Trump should be using taxpayer dollars to pay for his own legal fees, but ultimately, that's how taxpayer dollars work. The state can throw them at whatever they want to, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Ideally, I think taxpayers should be able to earmark where their taxpayer dollars go to. If taxpayers want their taxpayer dollars to go to pay for Trump's legal fees, I guess you can make the argument that will be okay. But as of right now, that's why I think taxation is inherently theft, because people don't get to determine where their taxpayer dollars go to. And yeah, that's my thoughts there. Next we have, Senate advances measured and military action Iran in rebuke to Trump from CNBC.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I hope that the military action Iran ends soon. But I think it's just it doesn't really matter, because the United States will just go somewhere else. They've really been pushing Cuba a lot recently. And ultimately, the U.S. is I think it's interesting. Trump says we gotta stop using the U.S. as the world police on the campaign trail. We gotta put America first. But ultimately, when he gets into office, he's just like a lot of other politicians. He'll just stab you in the back and just continue the status quo. And it just goes to show you can't really trust any politicians. And the ones who are principled are often the ones who get thrown out, like Thomas Massey, and that's important to remember. I do think, someone like Rand Paul, he's kind of principled too, but, he can't pick a fight as much with Trump, because, Trump's shown that if you pick a fight with him, he'll have you thrown out of Congress. I think that's important to remember as well. Next we have, endorsed by Trump, Ed Galbraith defeats Rep. Thomas Massey in GOP House primary from NPR.org, posted by LegioX. And yeah, we've already been talking about this, but yeah, I personally don't really care for that, But, ultimately, it just goes to show you the resources to get what they want usually do so. And that usually is the deep state, military-industrial complex, satanic cabal of lizard people, whatever you want to call them. They usually have the ability to get whatever they want to. And when they want something, they'll usually get it. And oftentimes, there's nothing you can do about it. That's why I think in a lot of regards, electoral politics are just for show. Just for those in positions of power to legitimize their own authority. And I think that's why, we got to get rid of democracy as a whole, because, democracy is inherently tyranny of the majority and mob rule. Just because the majority of a group believes something, of the majority of voters, I should say, believe something, that doesn't necessarily make it right. And democracy has shown time and time again that's the outcome of it. It's just going to lead to tyranny of the majority and mob rule, rather than putting actual principled people in positions of power like Thomas Massie. Next, we have Thomas Massie loses, proving that deficit hawks and foreign policy doves aren't welcome in Trump's GOP, from Reason.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I would kind of disagree with that headline. I do think Rand Paul is kind of a deficit hawk and a dove in foreign policy. But I think the real issue is that if you pick a fight with Trump, you're not welcome in Trump's GOP. Rand Paul, for all his faults, he isn't perfect, but he's definitely probably one of the best Congress people we have left out. Thomas Massie's on his way out, and it just goes to show you can't really pick a fight too much with Trump. I respect you. You gotta stand by your principles, but Trump's shown that if you're picking a fight with him and not sucking his dick enough, he'll have his friends at IPAC ask for a campaign to kick you out of office, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. It's very much that's how politics works. If you go against the grain too much, your party will find a way, will kick you out of office, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next, we have Israel's top newspaper calls the recent Thomas Massie elections the most consequential election for Israel is happening in Kentucky, a blatant admission that American elections are being run for foreign interests, posted by Jacob Anders, and that's cross-post from the Israel Exposed subreddit. And that looks like, I guess, a guy on TikTok or something talking about that, how Thomas Massie didn't take any money from IPAC, but Ed Galbraith took a shit ton of money from IPAC. And yeah, it just goes to show you that, the special interest groups are often the ones who are really determining policy rather than the elected officials. Elected officials are inherently at the behest of the special interest groups, because they're the ones who control whether they're reelected or not, like with Thomas Massie here. And oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it, and sadly that's just the way a lot of politics works. Next, we have Thomas Massie lost to Donald Trump. He may still get the last laugh, from Slate.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't know how likely it is he's going to get the last laugh, especially since, he can't run for a seat now due to the sore loser laws in Kentucky. Since he lost the primary, he can't run in the general as an independent or Libertarian or a third party. And yeah, personally, I only hope that, he'll get the last laugh in the long run. But sadly, I don't know how realistic that is, especially with, I guess it's more realistic than I think I'm probably giving credit for, especially since, most of the young people who voted for Massie, unlike most of the boomers, and they're going to be on their way out soon. So hopefully, the future will be more libertarian than the present is. But yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see on that front. It kind of reminds me of a post I wanted to share that I did to the Libertarian Party USA subreddit, scalding hot take. The past 10 years actually made the U.S. in a more libertarian direction than any other time in the post-World War II era. I said, on all sides of the political spectrum, people have lost faith in the government and institutions to do the right thing. They are correctly realizing that the state is going to be inherently self-serving and exists to simply force its will on people. They are recognizing that the special interests and other bad faith actors are the ones really running the show, and that most electoral politics is just for show. Admittedly, these are all extremely pessimistic realizations, but I do think the overall outcome might be more optimistic than a lot of people are thinking. When the state loses its legitimacy in the eye of the people, its power has become most merely skin deep. Thoughts. And yeah, personally, it just goes to show you that, when people realize that, it's not, the state isn't organic at all, and is merely a collection of astroturfed interests working against the people, it will lose its legitimacy, and that's ultimately what gives it its power. The state only has power for sociological imagination. If people cease to believe in it, it wouldn't have any power at all, and that's what I think people are going through today. They're realizing that the state is inherently a corrupt body that it seeks to enrich itself first and foremost against the people, and wants to enforce its will on the people through law enforcement and other agencies as well. And increasingly people aren't having it. I think that's something that might be positive in the long run. If people stop believing in the state, then it will cease to lose its power. And that's my thoughts there. Next, we have Thomas Massey lost. Oh, we did that one. Next we have Marjorie Taylor Greene says GOP's future destroyed after Trump-backed primary challenger defeats Thomas Massey in primary from FoxNews.com, posted by Jay Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on everything, but I definitely do think she's very principled. I wish she would have stayed for her primary and rather than just resign. But I do think she's one of the more relatively principled ones of the GOP for not lying down and sucking Trump's cock. And yeah, personally, I think that hopefully the GOP's future is destroyed. We definitely need a new party to rise up. The Republican Party has shown it's corrupt to the core and has been willing to justify authoritarianism as long as it suits its narrative ever since it first took power back in the 1860s with Lincoln. And yeah, so hopefully. I personally, I doubt it's going to be destroyed. It's just. 40% of people are going to vote Republican no matter what. 40% of people are going to vote Democrat no matter what. And that sadly is probably going to go on for the foreseeable future. Ultimately, when 80% of the people are going to vote Uniparty no matter what, a third party is going to struggle to gain any relevance. And we've seen that time and time again over the past almost 2 centuries now. And yeah, that's my thoughts there. Next we have body cam video. Tulsa police arrest Food Not Bombs volunteers for feeding homeless people from Reason.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't think police should be arresting people for just feeding homeless people. But the state can arrest you for whatever reason it wants to, and oftentimes there's nothing you do about it since they're the ones with the monopoly on the illegal use of force. Next, we have another Trump victory. Republican Rep. Thomas Massey loses Kentucky primary from CNBC.com, posted by Noam Sane. And yeah, personally, I would agree it's a victory for Trump. Thomas Massey didn't want to suck his cock as much and stood up to him on stuff like the Iran war and the Epstein files. And that's how politics often works. If you stand up against the part with whoever the party head is, you're gonna get kicked out. It happened a lot under Biden too, in regards to the Democrats, and it just goes to show you that increasingly the two major parties are unwilling to handle dissent at all, and oftentimes there's really nothing you can do about it. That's why I personally think it's easier to find a foothold in a third party, because ultimately they're smaller and allow for more dissent than the major parties currently, and that's my thoughts there. Next we have Trump has his eye on the highest seat in American politics, posted by Muck30, and that's looks like a screenshot of a TikTok or something, and it says it's Trump speaking. He says, "Trump, I'm right now 99% Israel. I can run for prime minister, so maybe after you do this, I'll go to Israel and run for prime minister." And one of the comments was Mohammed Al, who said that's the one thing I admire about the president. Even after becoming the president of the U.S., not once but twice, he's still looking for that promotion to the highest seat in American politics. You go for #45 and #47. And yeah, personally, I would agree. I would agree with that take. That in a lot of ways, the Prime Minister of Israel has more control over the U.S. than the President of the U.S. does. They're the ones who often they control one of the biggest lobbies with the Israeli interest lobby and IPAC. And I think that's important to remember as well. Ultimately, I don't know if Trump would be allowed to run for Prime Minister of Israel, but I definitely think he's deserved it. He's shown that he's that much up Israel's ass and is that unwilling to stand up to them. Next, we have Donald Trump, Thomas Massey, and the long, slow death of the Tea Party from Reason.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I know the Tea Party gets a bad rap these days because they'll always say, oh, they were racist because they said Obama was born in Kenya and all that. But I definitely do think the Tea Party was definitely more principled than whatever MAGA is these days. MAGA is just whatever Trump says it is. The Tea Party was at least trying to be principled and saying we need to stand up against big government. Meanwhile, you had Occupy Wall Street at the same time really going, we need to stand up against big business. Well, in reality, we are controlled by a coalition of big business and big government and the special interests that underlie them. And I think that's important to realize, and that's why I think they started pushing stuff like Trump and transgenders and vaccine mandates and all the cultural war issues what all the wedge issues to really divide people, because in reality, a lot of people were starting to agree that, we're controlled by a small group of elites. The Tea Party said they're, big government. The Occupy Wall Street said big business. But in reality, they're pretty much one and the same. And that's why I have to say that, they had to use the wedge issue to start dividing people, especially after, 2012 or so. Next, we have $50 a gallon gas is better than woke EVs, posted by Woke Boogeyman, and that's from the Gas Prices subreddit. And that looks like a screenshot of a post from James Mullins, who said, "Please take the woke electric agenda elsewhere. Gas won't be this high long. It's not the first time gas has gone up this high. I will pay $50 a gallon before I buy an unreliable electric vehicle." And yeah, personally, I definitely do think, if people want to buy a gas-powered vehicle or electric vehicle, I think they should be able to. It's interesting, Reddit loves EVs, but suddenly Elon's in the out-group, and they consider Tesla's now out-group as well. And it just goes to show you that, people will follow whatever the narrative is. Reddit might still like EVs as a whole, but they're against the biggest EV producer currently in Tesla, since they don't like their owner, since he's a member of the political out-group now. And it just goes to show you, they'll follow whatever the narrative is, rather than actually be principled, just like a lot of other people. People follow whatever the narrative is, rather than actually think for themselves. And that social media has shown that time and time again. And I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.